Where's the loud lady that says this meeting is being recorded?
She just said it to me.
Oh, she didn't say it to me. I guess she got tired
Oh,
of playing
I
it. All
also
right.
got a pop-up and I hit okay. So,
Oh, I guess maybe because I hit the no, because normally it says something. All right, well, we're recording. Hi, welcome to Something Positive for Positive People. My name is Courtney Brain. Something Positive for Positive People is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports people navigating herpes stigma. We do surveys and conduct research and in-depth interviews with people about their experiences navigating stigma, from mental health to symptoms to outbreak management and medications, all that good stuff. So this is really your go-to resource for herpes related information from a stigma perspective. We do what we can to get more of the information that people care about, such as transmission, information about disclosure, and a general overall perception of what life is like when you are living with herpes. Today, I want to be quick with the announcements, so I'm going to do my best. In 1 week, we have the rejection handling 101 workshop with Dakota Rampin and myself. We are going to be live in New York City, and this is going to be something that is live streamable. So we will link to that event in the show notes. So if you're someone who is local to New York City, please come out. You can join us. This isn't a herpes event or something positive for positive people event. This is something in collaboration with Dakota and myself. It's a topic that we've talked about, like wanting to support people through. She's a tough love relationship coach, and I talk to people about herpes who are scared of getting rejected all the time. So it makes sense. Then we got the Safe Sex Expo September 29th live in New York City. Um, Tickets are available at spfpp.org/events. And I have posts about it, more details are on the website. So this is part of me not going too much into those things. And then if you are someone who is in Atlanta, September 4th, downtown, my colleague Jordan Jones and I, she hosts the Vaginas, Vulvas, and Vibrators podcast. I If you don't know this, in 2021, I started this other podcast called Self, and it essentially is about emotional wellness for men. I was just kind of processing my own emotional evolution through 2021 to 2023, I would say, in a podcast, and I resurfaced that as a nonprofit organization. So it's called Self. The website is getself.org, and this is emotional wellness for men. Part of that is the Men's Emotional Wellness Symposium that we put together. So if you head over there, you sign up for the email list, you'll have free access to that temporarily because I want people to be able to access the information. And then I'm going to do something with it. I don't know exactly what, but yeah, I'm excited about that. So Jordan and I, we're going to have a live podcast recording on the topic of emotional intelligence in dating, being able to identify red flags and be ready for that, and to be able to see what emotional availability looks like in the dating world and relationships. So we don't have a physical location yet. We know that it's going to be downtown. We'll need to see how many people register, because if we need a smaller venue or a larger venue, we'll be able to just lock that in before the date. So those are all my announcements. And today's podcast, the main topic is going to be rejection. So, our guest here, I'll let you kind of say what made you reach out initially, but we had a little bit of a conversation about your recent experiences with rejection. And given the timeliness of that and the upcoming rejection handling workshop, it seemed like a no brainer for us to have this specific, dedicated conversation about rejection, and then be able to get this podcast uploaded. It'll be at midnight. If you approve, right, we'll let you listen to it, tell me what you think about it, and we'll go from there. But I will let you just introduce yourself, whatever you want to say. Most people just kind of give like age, location, and like just some thing about themselves, and we just go from there. So whatever you say, this is what people are going to reference you as, whatever name you use. And then I
yeah,
just want you to just share how we connected initially.
sure, yeah. Well, my name is Ariel. I'm based in DC. I'll be 37 actually in about 2 weeks. Oh no, 1 week actually. Um, I have a boring office job by day, and I'm a yoga teacher by night, recently certified. So that's been very exciting.
Hey,
So
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Six months ago, I would not have imagined ever, being here having this conversation. A year and a month ago, when I contracted herpes or found out that I contracted herpes, never would have imagined, being here having this conversation. Um, I don't know though, it's just kind of a reminder of like how quickly your life can change. And while on one hand, like this shouldn't change your life because it's like not a big deal because of the society within which we live and the stigma associated with like the reality of the fact, it is a big deal. I was married for 8 years, in a relationship for 10 years through most of my 20s. So I never really, I met my ex-husband a week after I graduated from college. So like I never really dated until as an adult until I was like 32, 33 when I got divorced. So, I'm in the grand scheme of things, like I'm still in some ways it's like I'm in my late 30s, but I have like the dating experience of somebody maybe in their like mid to late 20s. And so like in some ways this is, I'll still kind of a new to me. And so I had not encountered anybody who had herpes. Well, at least that disclosed that to me. You know what I mean? Clearly I have encountered somebody, but so this is all kind of new to me. And just like I didn't expect to like ever get divorced and go through that kind of major life change, I did not expect to, get herpes and have to deal with this. But it's just kind of a reminder, like you never know what life's gonna throw at you. And there's usually something good to be learned from the experience, even when it feels really difficult in the meantime.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing as much as you did.
Yeah, a lot,
And
sorry.
no worries at all. Because what this does is it shows us that we're real people, right? Who deal with things. You were married for 10, 11 years, did you say?
8 years, we were together for 10, so.
Okay, so 10 years. This was a 10-year relationship. I'm assuming it was a monogamous relationship. Is that
Mhm.
accurate?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then like, you leave the relationship and, then you end up getting herpes. So like that doesn't speak to what stigma generally says about a person who gets herpes. We don't hear from people who are married, were married, who are living with herpes. We only assume that it's people who have a lot of sex partners or don't wear condoms or anything like that, right? So I appreciate you sharing that because it directly challenges the stigma that we've grown to just accept and become accustomed to because that isn't, what we're hearing here.
Yeah, I'll be like real honest. It wasn't like I just hooked up with one person after being married and got herpes. So like let's be real about the situation
All
here.
right, cool, cool. I could
But
see it in your
but
face.
like
I was looking at your face while I was saying that. I was like, maybe I should stop talking and ask more
oh
questions
good.
here.
Yeah.
So I guess like, are you comfortable with talking about the marriage? Because
Sure.
okay, so this is the first person that you got into a relationship with after college, right? And nobody gets married expecting to get divorced.
No,
Was so there was herpes was a non-issue in your marriage.
no, no.
Compare,
That had nothing
okay,
to do with it. Yeah.
all
Yeah.
right. So I guess like what happened? What ended up happening in the marriage? Are you comfortable with sharing that? Like what led
Yeah,
to?
to some extent. Like at a high level, like we met when I was 22, got married when I was 24. I had, really no experience dating, really had, I had had like one or two sexual partners prior to like very, very, very limited experience. And then he was a wonderful person. This is nothing like, oh, he treated me poorly. I just think, the person you are in your early 20s is probably not the person you're necessarily going to be in your early 30s. And I just don't think like I really knew who I was, what I wanted, or how to be in a relationship. And I think that as I kind of got to know myself better and kind of came out of some of my insecurities and kind of grew into some confidence for myself and what I wanted, I think that like it just it just kind of became clear that we weren't entirely compatible. And I don't think being so young, so I was 32, it's like, can
Mhm.
I live with this level of uncertainty for the next 50 plus years? Like there's so much of life I had yet to experience when it came to dating and just more experiences. I never really had that. I was
Mm,
kind of too insecure at the time. I think at the time, like I had met a wonderful guy. I'm like, oh my God, somebody finally likes me, like it took 21 years, if I don't lock this down now, maybe I'll never find somebody again. And so like there was a lot of insecurity, I think, that drove me into it. That doesn't mean that he wasn't a wonderful human being. You know what I mean? Like that's not what he was fantastic, but it's just like, you know, I think society would say you probably shouldn't marry the first person you're in a relationship. It doesn't, some people have their high school, their college sweethearts, but like you just don't have enough experience to really know like what you like, what you don't like. And I'm figuring that out now, I guess. Or I've kind of figured that out now over the last, I guess that ended right before COVID. Great timing, right? So, and that kind of made dating difficult. And so really didn't start dating until 2020.
mhm.
Yeah. And so now we're in 2024. So it's been a handful of years. I've now had the experience and know what I was missing before.
Um, so out of curiosity, because communication is a really big deal with what we're seeing from people who have herpes, like if they had a lot of the communication skills and experience that they should have gotten at a much earlier age, they either might have been able to avoid getting herpes with just asking the questions and everything, or they would have been in a more compatible relationship where if they were with someone who had it, it wouldn't have been as much of an issue when they were exposed to it. So my question to you is, did you feel like you could talk to your ex-husband about the experiences that you wanted or the things that you felt like you were missing? Or oh, no?
No, no. I mean, um, we didn't we didn't have the most. No, I actually, like early on in our relationship, I tried to talk to him about some actually sexual experience that I had found to be pretty traumatic in my life, and he wasn't really interested in talking about that, and that set the tone very early on in our relationship that we don't talk about problems in this area. And that allowed, I think, a lot of issues to fester. And we went to couples therapy, and I felt like, fast this was like towards the very end. You went to couples therapy, and I think we were finally like talking about some issues for the very first time. And I always remember the couples therapist saying it was something to the effect of like, imagine if you had talked to each other more and like tackled some of these smaller issues earlier on, like it wouldn't have like metastasized into like some humongous issue that it's just kind of like it's kind of like too hard to break down. And so one of my biggest takeaways from my experience in my marriage that I've taken into like my life in general, work, other relationships, is like the importance of having the uncomfortable conversations. So like that is something that really resonates with me. I will say I'm much better about doing that in work than I am sometimes in doing that in dating. I still have some room for improvement. I think that I have maybe not wasted my time as much with some people, because I am willing to like ask the tougher questions. But I do think when it comes to having conversations around like safe sex and things like that, I certainly still have room for growth in that area.
And
For
we
growth.
all do. We
I have a
all
lot of room
do.
for growth in that area.
um tying the communication piece in with rejection, like you attempted to initiate like, hey, I have some problems around sexuality, there might be some trauma, and that was shut down for you early on in this relationship.
Yeah, very early on, like a couple months in, and that just kind of like set the tone that there's certain issues we don't talk about. And again, I think I like with divorce, I think I really experienced what is the consequence of not having communication. I had to experience that in a really, major way. And so again, while I still have some room for growth in, practicing what I preach, I'm very, I have gotten a lot better, and do really believe in having the uncomfortable conversations. And I think it's important. And, I think I had to learn the hard way what it's like when you don't have those conversations and don't talk about those things.
Wow. I thank you for sharing as much as you
Mm,
have been willing to,
yeah, sure.
because this whole thing started because something positive for positive people started because people with herpes wanted to kill themselves. And so it's like we get the diagnosis and we go down this mental health path, and then suicide and suicide ideation is like the core outcome that I want to eliminate. Like I want to minimize the impacts of that. I try to not use like violent language when speaking about herpes and herpes stigma. And here we are talking about like how I tie the inability to communicate and get compatibility and be able to talk about things like sexual health and compatibility and long-term goals with the relationship intentions into people's mental health switch when they get diagnosed with herpes, because oftentimes it's I knew I shouldn't have had sex with this person. I regret that. Like most people who get herpes, they regret the person that they had sex with that they think might have exposed them to it.
Myself
Now,
included.
wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so you
Tell you
live and
that
prove.
story. Yeah.
Yeah.
She
So
did,
and
but
so, had you had these communication skills, maybe you would have been able to weed out the incompatibility a lot sooner. Like, oh, if I can't talk to you about this, then this isn't going to work out, right?
I think that, I mean, and I'm like slightly embarrassed to admit this, but it's okay. Here we are. Like, I think that maybe there's only been there was one guy one time who like initiated a safe sex conversation with me, and I was like, oh, that's odd, but that's cool, like it really caught me off guard, but I was like, oh, that's great. But that happened one time, and I have never initiated with anybody else, so I'm complicit too. But it's just kind of interesting, I mean, to think over the last 4 or 5 years or so, however long it's been, like there's really only been like one safe sex conversation. And yeah, I mean, I have to ask myself why. Like, while I have come a long way in having uncomfortable conversations, as I said, I think, there's that hasn't permeated all areas yet. But I think now that I did make some, I mean, I'm happy to tell about the story of how I think it transpired and who I think it was. And I mean,
Don't say their name. Don't say their name.
no, I won't say the name.
All
Okay.
right.
But happy to talk about that experience. But like, you know, um, truth be told, like that was like one of two partners I ever was kind of careless with and didn't use protection with somebody I didn't really know. So it's
All
kind of
right.
like,
I
damn.
want to, I have to do this in
Yeah.
integrity. I have to do this. Okay. So careful and protection. These are two words that are very
Yeah.
stigmatically charged.
Fair.
We're talking about barriers, right? Barriers inherently offer protection, but we don't have to say like protection. So when I think about protection, right? Like, are you carrying protection? Typically means, do you have your gun on you, right?
Right.
So what do you
Right.
need protecting from? In this case, right? Like a barrier would minimize the possibility of infection, transmission, whatever,
Yeah. Might
whatever.
have happened anyway, but and it might not even been this dude, but there were several reasons why I think that it was this person, and that was one. Two, I know he lied to me about having chlamydia. And three, this is the really weird part. He actually asked me if I had herpes.
People
And
don't typically ask that.
right, but I was so caught off guard in the moment. And I was like, no, like, why would you think that? And so like I didn't think to ask him, do you? And so between the not using protection, I know he lied to me about a different STI, and then asking me if I had herpes. I mean, yeah, we'll never know, but that's my suspicion.
Okay.
But yeah, that was just in the moment. I was so caught off guard by being asked that question that it did not even fathom asking it in return to him.
Yeah. And even having herpes, I know that people are so overwhelmed by the idea of initiating the conversation around disclosing that when they get it out, like they don't even think to ask, what about you? It's all right, I got herpes. And then you just kind of wait on a response, right? And
Yeah,
there oftentimes isn't the experience or the thought process of, well, what about you? Like, when's the last time you were tested? What about your safe sex practices, right? We
right.
don't typically have that. And it's because we're not taught to, right? Like, who taught you how
No,
to vet a partner for relationship compatibility? Who taught you how to ask someone about sexual health? And you said you had one guy do it. Like, how shocking was that for you? Like you were caught off guard by somebody
scary.
doing something that should be like a normal thing, right?
Yeah. Hmm. I've often thought about just reaching out to him and saying like, "That was cool. Like, thank you. I didn't appreciate it at the time." We're still like slightly in contact. It's like, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but like in retrospect, like that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So with that person, like you said, you're still in touch. Like I'm curious, like if this person was someone who was willing to communicate something so confidently and like made you feel safe, would you say that it made you feel safe?
It was so soon. I mean, it didn't make me feel unsafe. That's the thing. Like, it was so soon. It was like one of the very first people I had been with after I'd gotten out of my marriage that I didn't know like heads like I just didn't know anything that was kind of going on then, to be perfectly honest. I just remember thinking like that was weird. Like not in like a bad way, but just like, oh, like that was unexpected. Like I didn't know
Mhm.
people did that, or and frankly, people don't do it. Like
More people don't do it than do it.
yeah, some do. I just haven't encountered those people. And
Yeah.
yeah,
So your experiences after that have given you a newfound appreciation for this person's
yeah,
willingness to initiate the conversation. Got it.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Sure.
and I so you said you're still in contact. Like, is there no longer a relationship? Like, are
Oh,
y'all
not
casual?
close. I mean, it was somebody, no, like, I mean, we don't live in the same state. I mean, this was somebody
Okay.
like I knew like several years ago. And I think maybe like last year he like texted, "How are you doing?" And so it's like we're like on like I have his phone number. I could text him. It's probably been a year or two since we've chatted, but like we're it loosely in
Okay.
contact.
All
Yeah.
right. Got it. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was curious because there's just like a I wonder about the quality of the relationship for someone who is more willing to communicate about uncomfortable things and the level of safety that presents, how attractive that is. Because many times people say, yeah, you know, I've disclosed to someone and they told me, oh, wow, that is so like I'm more attracted to you because you were willing to talk about that hard and vulnerable thing. So that's where I was kind of going with that. But yeah,
Yeah.
y'all haven't talked in a while.
It
Never
was
mind.
too early on in my like post-marriage dating life to really like to know. I didn't have enough data points or enough
Yeah.
experiences at the time to really like have it much of an opinion at the time. But
Yeah.
he
Now
was a good one. Now I know that.
yeah, you
Yeah.
said that uh you needed to get things that you weren't able to get in your marriage, like experiences. Do you mind like sharing what some of those were? I know you said like dating experience, but I wonder what the value of dating experience is when you're in like the peak of what dating, like the outcome that dating is supposed to get people, right? Which is to be married. So what was missing from the marriage that you needed to explore?
I mean, okay, well, truth be told, a lot of it was like sexual experience. Like, I didn't think we were like particularly compatible in that area. And I think I kind of knew that really early on before we got married. But then I think because of insecurities, I was willing to overlook that at the time. And then as I became kind of more confident in myself, and I just realized like there's a whole world out there. And I just like I'm never going to get to experience any of that. And there wasn't really a willingness from my partner to explore that with me. Uh,
Ah,
I was just too young. I don't know. And like, I
all
kind of
right.
knew at the time, like, maybe not like there were red flags that I recognized at the time, but I was like, red flags be damned. We're going to defy the odds and we're going to be together forever.
I have to shamelessly plug. So we talked about red flags. Red flag readiness is part of the workshop or the live podcast recording that Jordan and I are going to do in Atlanta on September 4th. Get your tickets, getself.org. That's where that is. And then the Safe Sex Expo. So the point of the Safe Sex Expo is very like beautifully aligned with what you're saying here because it sounds like you were in a monogamous relationship that started out pretty let's call it vanilla, right? And you were looking to spice things up. You wanted to be more satisfied. You wanted to vocalize that to your partner, and your partner was unwilling to move forward through that. So what we're attempting to do with the Safe Sex Expo is introduce language, ideas, and create an intentional environment to foster the skills to communicate that, hey baby, I really like you when you put your hand around my neck. Let's go and do a choking class, or let's talk about some spanking. Let's talk about dirty talk, right? Like these are very introductory things that can go and introduce that you can introduce into your relationship with your partner, and to be able to have like qualified professionals leading these conversations to give you the tools and skills that you need to facilitate said conversation with your lover, right? And it sounds like oh, I'm so sorry that you experienced this. It sounds like that to me, because like maybe he had a perception of I don't want to assume anything that you were asking for, but
Mm, I'm gonna just pause you right there. Like,
okay,
it's a lot more complicated than we can really get into here, but I will say it
okay.
was more like we just like it was like largely like a sexless marriage, and because we didn't really,
Oh,
yeah, it's really sad actually, but it's more like because we didn't have a culture of communication in our relationship. Like it was something that, kind of, it was the kind of like the elephant in the room we didn't really talk about. And then, years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years in, it's really hard to start talking about this when you haven't for such a long time. And there's like so much, it's just been the big elephant in the room and the thing you're ignoring.
I
So
f- I
what,
feel
yeah,
like I feel like
yeah.
such a dick. I was selling. I was
No,
like, "Oh,
no,
this
it's
is a
okay.
perfect
It's okay.
example."
It's
I was like,
okay,
"This
it's
is a
okay,
perfect
it's okay,
example of
it's
a thing
okay.
you were doing."
Yeah, it's like a long, kind of complicated, and kind of like a tragic story where I feel like, I suffered in it, he suffered in it. He's remarried now, he has a kid. I hope we're not in contact, but like I hope he's really happy and has found what he's looking for. Honestly, like when I found out he got married, I was like, oh great, he got a wife and I got herpes. Like what the fuck? But I'm very happy for him.
Yeah. Well,
But
are you happier now?
yeah, it was the right thing to do.
Mhm.
Like there really wasn't there really wasn't a reconcilable path about where we wanted to go, and like it just wasn't really an option to continue together. And so days, can be hard, and I find myself the situation I'm in, and some days are better than other days, now. And but staying in that marriage, no one was going to be happy with that. Like that was not the right course of action either. So it was the right decision.
Okay, well, I know how difficult it can be to like walk away, especially from something that's so familiar.
Mhm.
Like, good on you for making that big step and doing the hard thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know none of this has anything to do with the herpes story, but I think it's important that
Yeah.
we see people as people who have life experiences aside from our sexuality, our herpes diagnosis, whatever. And right, like sex leads to herpes in majority of cases, at least the stigmatized herpes. And no sex led to divorce, which we can
Yeah.
argue has like roughly the same mental health psychological impacts, because
Yeah.
like there's a grief to it, right? There's the grief
Yeah.
of I was in this relationship and I saw myself being in this relationship. So you got to like grieve the past, grieve the future. And then we get herpes, and it's the same thing with our
Yeah.
sex life. Are there any other shared similarities between like your divorce, being married, getting divorced, and then like you being able to finally freely explore your sexuality, creating this vision of what your life was going to look like, and then getting this diagnosis and that changing for you?
Oh, sorry. Is that a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Ask it one more time. Sorry.
Yeah. So, is there a parallel between the grief of marriage
Yeah.
to divorce versus like your freedom to explore your sexuality and then getting herpes?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's like I had all this kind of hope for the future and ideas about the future when I, um, got divorced. And I'm not going to say that getting herpes took that away from me, because like being out in the streets was really fucking hard even before herpes. So I have to remind myself of that all the damn time. That it wasn't like it was a piece of cake like before getting herpes, but um I would say you're absolutely right. There is some grieving. There was definitely grieving a life that I was, expecting to live. And there is absolutely grieving now, and it's just kind of like, well, now it's just going to be yet another step. It's going to be just that much harder. And I do think because I don't know, like as I'm thinking, like sex has been an issue. Like I had for me what was kind of a traumatic experience in college, and that's what I shared with my ex-husband. And then our marriage was kind of like a somewhat of a traumatic experience in the sexual department. And then, kind of now having to contend with having an incurable STI. I mean, that's just I silver lining is I think I'm a pretty resilient person. I mean, some days are better than others, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I do feel like I've been grieving, and if you ask my therapist, I'm still grieving, although I'm making progress. It's one of the reasons why I really wanted to do this podcast. I mean, I still definitely think that, it's like, oh, there's this horrible, gross secret that I have that I must disclose, and we'll see if this person will accept me. Like, unfortunately, I'm still kind of coming into it with this attitude, and I need to like I still need to work on that. That it's like, oh, will they accept me versus kind of being like, well, will I accept them? Like this is my litmus test for them. Like I know that's kind of the direction I would like to get to. And I think part of that is like just desensitizing myself so much and like talk like that's why it's part of the reason why I want to do this. Like I'm just trying to desensitize myself to talking about it. And with people who are my friends and stuff, like anyone who I talk to about sex, they know I have herpes. So it's like it's not a secret. But it's still when it comes to like disclosing and dating. I mean, truth be told, I have not dated a lot in the last year since the diagnosis. In part because I've been busy with other things, but I'd be lying to myself if I didn't like admit that like the herpes has definitely something to do with it too. Like it makes me not want to put myself out there for something that like is already going to kind of like I already don't have a ton of time for. I already am like I'm kind of distracted with other things. Like I certainly am not going to like make my life even harder on top of, you know, what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you as
Yeah.
you were saying what you were saying, but in that there was a point that you spoke to very beautifully, like realistically, right? Like as much as you want to just say, like, I want to be in this place with my diagnosis, but I know I'm not at that place, right? Like I think what you said was you would like to be able to, just say that this isn't influencing anything, but it is. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd be lying if I said it weren't having
That was
any.
what you said. I'd be lying if okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you are busy. Would you say that you're busy because like are you avoiding dating at all?
Maybe a little bit. I mean, I do feel like I live a full life. Like, unfortunately, I work more than I would like to at this point in time. I also have my yoga, I have, good friends. I keep busy. I'm not just like sitting around twiddling my thumbs with nothing to do. But like I could make time for dating if I wanted to. Like people make time for the things they want to do, right? So I definitely could be doing more, but I'm not prioritizing it. And I would say like a not insignificant reason as to why I'm not prioritizing it is because like I'm not really in the mood to be rejected. And I have just a few data points. I don't have many, but they're not great. The ones that I do have, unfortunately. But
Can I
I have
ask you
worked. Yeah, yeah, whatever.
can I
Mhm.
ask you a potentially challenging question?
Mhm.
You walked away from a marriage because of, or partially because of the sexlessness of it. And then you are able to have sex now, right? And now you're not doing the thing that you felt like you couldn't do or you weren't actually doing in your marriage. Uh, So what I'm saying is this is interesting that you found this newfound freedom. Like you discovered, hey, there's a problem. The problem is that I'm not having sex in my marriage. I want to have sex, and now relationship ends, and this is me making it super simple. I'm
Yeah, yeah,
making it simple. Okay.
yeah.
And now you can have sex, and now that you can, you're not, like, you're not dating, you don't want to do the things that lead to the thing that you want, and it's almost like there's no desire for it, or the desire is lower for it, or maybe it's the effort that goes into it. And maybe it's about the herpes, maybe it's about the amount of work that has to go into dating. Can you just speak to that however you feel compelled to?
Yeah, I mean, no, like you boiled it down pretty well. I think my desire is a little bit lower at the moment because like dating has been very challenging. I think that that's not a surprise to anybody
Okay.
that for many reasons things have gotten more challenging. I do actually think there are some things about DC that make it like ever so slightly worse than in a lot of other okay, yeah, so you know what's up. Yeah, so like DC doesn't help on top of that, and it's just been a lot of not so great experiences. And so, I think at some point like it gets like a little bit tiring to kind of put up with that, and it's hard to meet people organically. So I think that, I think in part my will is down a little bit independent of herpes because it's been frankly a lot of like challenges and negative experiences. I mean, I would actually say that like I kind of went off the apps for a while, and I wouldn't say it was because of the herpes. Herpes was like last straw Eve. It wasn't the last straw. I would say it was like a negative experience with somebody after the diagnosis that actually had nothing to do with herpes. Because I'm not gonna lie, at the time, like I was still so new, like I didn't actually disclose it because I just didn't know at the time. Like it was just so new. So like that, and so like completely independent of that, it was like a really negative experience. And that's when I was just kind of like, I'm done. Like I need a break. And I also was about to start my yoga teacher training. And so I was like, I would like to concentrate my efforts on myself right now. And it's not the time for distractions. And then when yoga teacher training ended, that's when I said, okay, well, I will go back out there a little bit. And I've been on the apps and I've been on like a handful of dates. Um, but it's just, yeah, like my heart's just not into it. And again, I think I'm just like a little bit less likely to put myself out there. But I think I was like already not totally jazzed about putting myself out there before. And even like, I reached out to you because of the rejection experience, like one specifically, but I have a couple other data points that maybe weren't quite so like explicit, like this person said to me. But it was like, I don't know. It's been the one positive experience, I guess you could say, was with somebody who knew me long before herpes. And so it wasn't like, we weren't new to each other. Um, yeah. I don't know if I really answered your question or not.
Yes, yes, you did.
Okay,
Uh,
thank you.
we're at like being able to talk about the rejection thing, but you give me so much to like talk about, and I never like giving herpes more of these podcast episodes than I give the person, right?
Yeah,
So in the beginning, it was all things herpes, but I hope you like recognize
yeah,
that we've talked more about dating, we've talked more about
yeah.
communication, we talked more about
Mhm.
marriage and divorce, and we talked about like your relationship to like the
Yep,
parallel of marriage, divorce, sex life, and getting herpes. And like that's kind of been the core of this, not necessarily rejection. So maybe I won't put that
yeah.
in the title, but this feels like it's just such a much more rich conversation. Like, how are you feeling? Because I can see it in your face, like I'll make you think sometimes about things that you might not have been
Good.
asked before. Does this feel good for you?
No, that's good. I wasn't expecting to go down the marriage route. So I'm kind of thinking, okay, how do I like how do I sanitize it ever so slightly, to be appropriate for the audience and who might actually end up hearing this. But no, it's good. It's good. You just never know what's going to happen. And so I think it makes for a richer conversation as well. And, I think, like I made a lot of mistakes in my marriage, I did the best I could with what I knew, or maybe I didn't. I don't know. Like I made a lot of mistakes, and I think coming out of that, like I really wanted to like meet somebody and like do it right this time. They take what I had learned and like really show up and be a good partner. Like I wasn't a good partner in my marriage. I was spoiled and like I don't know. I didn't really have it modeled to me how to show up in a relationship. So there was a lot of room for improvement on my part and my contribution too. And I was really, really excited to like be a good partner. And I would say even like before herpes, like it has been hard for me, like just really disappointing and like really kind of sad that I don't feel like I've had the chance to like be that partner for somebody. Like I haven't, I've had like a boyfriend and a situationship since the divorce. You know,
Ew, situationships, gross.
yeah, and once I kind of yeah, I ended that one. Yeah, anyway, we don't need to get into that, or we could, but like I just really don't feel like I've had the chance to like really be a like I just haven't had the chance. Like I haven't found somebody who like really wants to be in a relationship with me, I would say, and so like I haven't really had the chance to like really like show up and be that partner, I want to be with somebody who wants to be in a partnership with me. And so I think, oh, to your point about the grief, I think a lot of the grief that I am like experiencing in the post herpes era, it's not even so much about like, oh, I like it's gonna be harder to have this sexual experience or that. It's just that I do think that it may make it harder to just, find it was already hard to find somebody and like establish a relationship. And now it's like there's just this added thing. And so it makes it just it feels like it takes me a little bit further away from like what I was really hoping for. And I was already like having these doubts and like I've kind of come to terms like maybe I'll find somebody, maybe I won't, and like I'll get it, like it'll be okay kind of either way. Like that's kind of how I was feeling already like pre herpes, but then it's just like, well, now it's going to be really fucking hard to find somebody. So I think there has been, right or wrong, there has been some grief that I have had of like this is just going to make it that much harder to find a partner. And like I really wanted, I don't know, it's something that I really wanted, still do want, but it's just a little bit more challenging now. It's just an extra variable that now I have to account for.
With me, I wanna touch on that because you said, it's hard to find somebody who wants a relationship with me. You said that a couple of times. Did you
Or
meant it
period
or
relationship.
period?
Yeah.
Okay. With me is very specific. So I bring this up because one of the things that I recognize is that people kind of expect to be rejected for having herpes. And this is one of the most narcissistic and conceited things that, we can expect is that, oh, I'm so perfect that this thing that I have on my genitals periodically is why they don't want to move forward with me
Yeah.
because I would be perfect had it not been for this diagnosis, right? And so when you say with me, are there other areas of incompatibility? I just kind of set you up to not want to say, yeah, it's because of the herpes, right? But what reasons from your experience would you say that it seems like people don't want to be in a relationship with you?
Well, that's a good question, and maybe that's a little bit too negative about my. There isn't like some like specific thing that comes to my mind that it's that like I can point to the way like you can like easily point to herpes. I mean, it's got like I don't know. I think I'm a catch, but it's still hard. I don't know. There maybe I'm being a little too hard on myself, and maybe it's really not like specifically with me. It's
Thank
just I
you
haven't
for
found.
saying it. Thank
Yeah.
you for saying it. I don't want to sound like a motivational speaker or anything. So I just ask these
Of course.
questions and hope that people say the thing out loud that they really
Yeah.
need to hear from themselves. Like I can say it, but it's so much better when you connect the dots yourself and then you say it.
Yeah. I mean, I think though that is indicative of some of my like inner subconscious or maybe not so maybe conscious, self-doubt and just kind of my own insecurities that I think I've come a long way with, but I would say it gets hard not to internalize rejection. I'm not even talking about like herpes related rejection. I'm like it's just I think that in some of the dating experiences that I've had, I think I never want to be one of those people who just like can't see that they're actually the problem and they're pointing fingers elsewhere and they're not looking to take a hard look at themselves. And so I think maybe I take too hard a look at myself and I can be really hard on myself, but it's kind of like, oh, well, if there's been all these experiences and they haven't worked out, like I'm the common denominator here. So the problem must be me. I think it is very easy for me to fall into that trap of thinking. Like it's something I'm aware of, awareness is the first step, something that like I'm trying to work through, but I do think that because I never want to be like blind to my own shortcomings, maybe I go a little bit too much in the direction of blaming myself. Um, and I'm a little hard. My therapist tells me I'm very hard on myself, so working on that.
Yeah, after awareness comes choice, right?
Yeah,
So you're
absolutely.
aware and you're actively choosing to do things like this. You said you wanted to get comfortable talking about herpes. I want to speak to the insecurity. You mentioned that you felt insecure in your marriage and then you got this herpes diagnosis and it kind of like tacked on a new level of insecurity. Would you say between your divorce and then before you got herpes that the insecurities kind of like went away? You became more confident and secure, and then herpes just kind of like pulled the rug of this accumulated confidence over
Yeah.
you?
I think the experience dating over the last several years chipped away
Oh man.
at my confidence, and that was kind of like, well, again, like I'm the common denominator here, like there must be something wrong with me. um that's what my, the mean voice in my head tells me, and I can try to overcome that. And
Mhm.
but I would say that, yeah, it was already 2023 was a really, really hard year for me, like really, really hard. It started off in the beginning of the year. Like I got friend dumped, which is like, wow, like I'm kind of used to guys dumping me. Like I'm not used to like a girl, like a friend dumping me. Like I got friend dumped, middle of the year, herpes, end of the year, like my cousin died, who's my age.
My
And so
condolences.
and then there was a lot of shit in between all that. So, but like that was just kind of like the really like negative trajectory of last year. So but like even like the front half of the year, because herpes was in July. It was just there was like a lot of dating experiences that just kind of like kind of chipped away, and just kind of made me feel like shit. And but again, like I don't want to assume that everyone, I don't want to be pointing fingers at like everyone else is the problem. I'm great. Everyone, but um sometimes I can go a little too hard in the direction of, it's all my fault. Um,
Well, what does it look like for you to just be softer with yourself?
I mean, doing things like this and like talking about my vulnerabilities and recognizing that like it's okay, I don't know, trying to be aware and to your point, making like an active choice to put those thoughts aside and bring my mind, back to center or back to something more positive. Easier said than done, but it's a lifelong practice.
It really is. You having recently completed a yoga teacher training, I know what you went through or what you might have went through. Mine was all virtual. Was yours in person at all?
Yeah, it was in person. It was
Oh,
awful.
good. So you probably got the experiences of like those vulnerable moments and like the shares. I'm curious, did you tell anyone at your yoga teacher training about your diagnosis?
No, I did not. And it was funny. Well, funny, maybe not the right word. Like I had alluded to the fact that like this the yoga teacher training, I remember we had like the open house in September. It started in November. And I remember on multiple occasions, and they're like, oh, why are you coming to yoga teacher training? And I'm like, 2023 has been a really difficult year. And like I just, I need some time to like focus on me. So that was kind of, I had alluded to it. And then at the end of yoga teacher training, like on our like second to last day, we were kind of talking about it. I actually, I had said to them, like I had alluded to the fact that like yoga teacher training, like this came at like a really difficult time for me. And I actually talked about like the friend dumping piece of that and how actually like just based on the things that like the friend dumping occurred. And that's actually my therapist was like, you got to do something to like shake it up, get out there and meet new people. And I was like, all right, like I'm going to join the gym. And so that was my way of shaking it up. But like, because I joined the gym, I like became friends with one of the yoga teachers. That yoga teacher encouraged me to do the yoga teacher training. And so like actually I was kind of able to kind of be at peace with this friend who had dumped me, because like had she not dumped me, it wouldn't have set off the chain of events that brought me to the yoga teacher training. But so I chose to focus on that and not on the herpes piece. I was still not comfortable to bring that up, although coincidentally, the guy who ran my yoga teacher training, he used to have his own podcast, and I actually told him I was going to be doing. I'm friends with his girlfriend, and I told them too that I was going to be doing this podcast. And I was like, "Do you have any advice for someone going on a podcast?" So they now know. At least the head of my yoga teacher training now knows. But no, I did not share it in my teacher training.
I asked because I had a very similar experience as well. When I got there, they were like, "Well, why are you here?" And I really like suppressed or repressed and just avoided and ignored the fact that me getting my herpes diagnosis is what led to me starting yoga. Period.
Hmm. Okay.
When I was diagnosed, I'm 20, oh my God, 2013, I guess. I saw that stress management was one of the things that you should do to manage it. And yoga kept coming up. So I would go to yoga, go to classes. And it was one day at a gym yoga class that the instructor was like, "Hey, if you consider being a yoga teacher, you should attend the teacher training. They give out scholarships." I was like, "Oh, really? All right, well," because I wasn't going to pay like $3,000 for
Yeah.
that. It's like I
Yeah.
can go to yoga at my gym for free. Well, for
You're
as
already
part of the
paying for it.
$30
Yeah.
a month, right?
Yeah.
And so I get there and, I'm like, oh, well, I want to teach yoga to athletes. I was an athlete and this was such bullshit. And the more time that we spent there, the more I was realizing that this is bullshit because I completely blocked out of my mind that the whole reason that I started going to yoga was because of my herpes diagnosis to manage stress. And over the course of my teacher training, when we had those exercises where we have to ask ourselves, what is your intention, what's coming up for you, it was eventually that unlocked for me and I was like, oh shit, actually, like this has been something that's been really critical to me throughout the course of my diagnosis and living with this. And so my teacher training gave me access to being able to connect these emotions with my body and recognize like the kinds of thoughts that I was repressing or just avoiding altogether. And eventually I did. Eventually, I opened up and shared, like, "Hey, I said this thing, but it's actually this thing." And I don't want to say it felt like a confession, but it definitely felt liberating to be able to be in alignment with what that truth was. Here's how yoga impacted me. Here's where it started. This is just what the story is. And now, fast forward, I did the 200-hour training, I did the 300-hour training, and now I'm in yoga therapy training as well. And part of what I would like to do is be able to offer like the emotional wellness components of yoga and yoga therapy to people who are struggling with herpes stigma, because I think that it's very therapeutic, even in just like this interview process of asking questions and active listening. These are all things that you learn in a yoga teacher training that can be applied. Like this was yoga, right? And I can tell by how present you are in your listening and like your ability to sit with, take a pause, and respond to things that like we had similar experiences with our yoga teacher training.
Yeah. I could talk yoga like all day.
Yeah, well, I
Totally
mean,
with you. But
I
I
believe,
wasn't ready yet to share with that group. Although
yeah,
a couple of them now know. Maybe
I
now after this
believe
more of them will know.
there's gonna come a time where there will be an invitation to other yoga teachers who have experience with herpes to offer things to this community. I don't
Yeah.
exactly know what that looks like, but I've been putting classes together. So yoga has been super helpful to me. I mentioned how it's helped me through avoiding outbreaks. And we saw in our latest survey that 15% of people contribute emotional stress to their outbreaks. So this is a very powerful tool that can help support people through managing their outbreaks and physical symptoms of herpes. And I think it addresses the stigma very well because we get to untangle what our beliefs are about ourselves now that we have herpes and what's like projected beliefs onto us.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about letting go of the societal conditioning to get back to
Mhm.
your true self, and so I'd love to collaborate and help out any way
Yay.
I can. Yeah,
All
for
right.
yeah,
Amazing.
sure,
Amazing.
sure.
So we did get to talk about that. I had that like pinned in my mind to talk a little bit about
Yeah.
yoga and your diagnosis. So you said that 2023 was just like a hard year for you collectively, and that it was more of the friend breakup that sent you there. It wasn't your herpes diagnosis.
No, well, the friend breakup started like the series of events because like I joined the gym because of that, like directly because of that, and that's like when I met the yoga, like kind of befriended one of the yoga teachers, and I'd been doing yoga for many years before. I just did it through my yoga studio in Texas online because I just think they're the best. And I was like, maybe I should like get out of the house and do yoga with other people and not just in my living room, and so started doing it at the gym, and then yeah, I do think though it was kind of like when it came time to do the teacher training, when it was time to like decide if I wanted to do that, I do think it was like, that by then I did have the herpes diagnosis, and it was like, like this has been a really tough year, and this would maybe be like a good time to reconnect to myself. Yoga has helped me through difficult times before. It made a big difference in my going through my divorce. And so maybe now this is the time to really double down and, focus on myself, on my practice, um, and that kind of true inner sense of knowing, and that comes with yoga. And so again, like the friend breakup started the series of events, but then I think all the stars kind of, aligned, herpes being one of those stars, that it was like, this is the time to do the yoga teacher training and to take my practice to the next level. It's helped me through difficult times before, and I'm certainly going through difficult times now. And so this is the time. And I do think that the stress piece with related to herpes is, I mean, that's real. Like the day that I had my first outbreak was an extremely, I'll not forget this day. It was an extremely stressful, like kind of like a turning point at work from a stress perspective. Like it was a very stressful day at work. And then, one of the things kind of like I worry about, I haven't, like I take I take the antivirals now. So like I haven't had an outbreak since November. I've only ever had, I guess, three, including the initial one, something like that. But like I get stressed about getting stressed and that causing an outbreak. It's like meta stress, and like that's not good. It's like I'm worried about being stressed because the stress could cause an outbreak. And so it's just, it's just like a dangerous stress downward spiral that you can get into. Um, but I'm trying to just, focus on my practice, my diet, getting a good night's sleep, um, all of the things. But stress has always been a particularly difficult one for me, and like that's like the big one,
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that this is a really good place for us to wrap up. Is there anything that you want to leave us with that I didn't get to ask you about?
I could tell you like really briefly about the actual rejection experience that I had.
Yes, let's do that. All right.
It could take like a little bit of a long time, but I'll go quick. Like I was on a second date with somebody, and I wasn't anticipating to share with this person in that moment, but then they opened up to me about something in their family that they thought was, in their own words, brought them a lot of shame and was like difficult for them to disclose in dating. And he chose to share this with me. And I was like, oh, well, like this is a good opening. Like he's just shared something with me that is difficult to disclose in dating. Like, this is my time to share something with him that I find difficult to disclose in dating. And so like we had been at lunch. He had told me this thing about his family at lunch. We were like then walking to go see a movie. And I was like, I'll tell him on the walk. And I told him on the walk, and I'm trying to remember exactly what I said. Like a year ago, I contracted herpes. It's like I take antivirals. I haven't really had any outbreaks since then. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what I said. I was like, do you know much about herpes? And then I kind of blacked out a little bit because I was like so anxious. And he kind of rattled off a bunch of things that he knew, and not all of them sounded like entirely accurate to me, but like I didn't feel prepared to like have that conversation. But he did mention something about like sharing food or like glasses and how that could have some sort of impact. And the reason that kind of stuck out to me, he said something to that effect. And I remember thinking to myself, like, that doesn't sound entirely accurate, but I didn't have, like, I wasn't prepared to like fact check him. But the reason that stuck out to me, like his whole vibe changed. Like he was kind of like, oh, okay, well, like I don't think that changed. Like, okay, like thank you for telling me. But the whole vibe was different. Like I could sense like the palpable disgust and sadness, like or like disgust and disappointment, you know. And then I was like, well, I felt like a leper. I felt like shit. But then we were like sitting in this movie, and I'm like still kind of like feeling bad. So I was like, you know what? Like I'm gonna go get some popcorn, and I'm gonna see if he'll have any. And he refused to eat the popcorn that I bought, which again, like I did that because he had mentioned something about like sharing food, and so I was like, this will be my little test. He wouldn't have any of the popcorn. And that made me feel like a real big leper. And then we had this like really awkward, like long walk home slash to the metro. And he didn't like we had like the like 4th of July was coming up, and there's time off, and I'm like, oh, like what do you have going on? And he like there was no like, what do you have going on? You want to get together? And so I kind of get home and I'm like I don't want to like sit here and like wait for this to unfold. And I was like, and maybe I didn't do enough. Maybe I didn't invite him to feel comfortable to ask questions. So that's when I sent him this text message, and I was like, thanks for sharing about your experience with your family. Regarding what I shared with you, if you have any questions, I'm happy to talk about it. And he didn't respond to me. And so I was like, I was gonna have work. This was on a Sunday. I was gonna have work on Monday. I was like, if he's gonna like end things with me, like I'd rather this happen on a Sunday and like not in the middle of my work week where I'm gonna be distracted. But then he didn't answer, and so that kind of like um told me. And then like on Monday in the middle of I'm just pulling it up, in the middle of my work day, I get a message from him which basically said, amongst like, unfortunately, this is not something I'm willing to accept in my life right now. Maybe at some point that'll change, but I think at this point it's best we go our separate ways. All the best moving forward. Take care.
And I mean, everybody has their right to that, right? And I want to just say, like, maybe he hadn't had this experience where someone
Oh,
shared
sorry. The
such a
first
thing.
the first part of the text message, this actually isn't the first time I've met someone on the apps in the same situation. So I know it's difficult to bring up and think it speaks a lot to your character. Unfortunately, it's not something I'm willing to accept in my life.
Oh, that changes everything. Like first way that you read it, I was like, oh, okay, well, that kind of
So you
sounds
think it makes
bad.
it better?
I think kind of. I think
Oh,
it
okay.
makes it different. Let me not say better, but like I guess you know him, so you have a demeanor to attach to it. But when I objectively hear those words, like going from what was the first part of that message? Can you read that again?
I'll read the whole message. I appreciate your honesty in sharing your situation with me. This actually isn't the first time I've met
Gratitude.
someone on the apps in this situation, so I know it's difficult to bring up and it speaks a lot to your character. Unfortunately, it's not something I'm willing to accept in my life right now. Maybe at some point that'll change, but at this point, I think it's best we go our separate ways. All the best
No
moving.
curiosity. Yeah. Okay. So generally when I talk to people about like how to receive someone's diagnosis, it's generally with gratitude and then curiosity. So he got the
No
gratitude
curiosity.
part. No care. No, I do not care to get to know you. I don't care to learn anything about this. Someone else told me that, and I don't want to accept this in my life. And I'm just gonna avoid it for as long as I can. So this is somebody who just doesn't date people with herpes, who, like probably most of us before we got it, we may have had a similar response. I don't want to say I don't know that I would have been like, oh, thanks for telling me, tell me more. It would have just been like, all right, I'm good. Like
Yeah.
based on
No.
the information that we have, right? It would have been nice for him to explain that to you like when you told him, right? Rather than, going through the awkwardness of the dates. And this is one of the things that I do get a little bit frustrated about with men is like not having and maybe it's just a language thing, like not being able to or having the language to be able to address things like when they need to be addressed. Like he was prepared to probably just ghost you, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
if yeah, he was ready to just let that go. He wasn't gonna eat the popcorn. He just became avoidant and got cold. You felt the vibe change. But to be able to communicate that, maybe even have said, like, oh, hey, I know we have these plans, but like we should talk about this. Like, I don't know that I'm really willing to accept that because this is actually what I want, and that gets in the way of this in this way. But a lot of people just don't want to address and deal with, having this as a potential obstacle because it requires vulnerability, right? Like, I know how hard that was for you to share. I don't want to share something like that. I don't want to deal with hard things, right? Like, and
Yeah.
he shared something that might have been vulnerable about his family to you, but maybe that was just like easy to him. Maybe he like throws that around. Maybe that's like his
The
joke at the
line.
party, you
Yeah.
know? Oh, cool. I checked the box of demonstrating vulnerability, and then he's met with it back, and it's like, I don't want
Yeah.
anything to do with this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it was the not
um,
any willingness to, like, even, like, ask a question,
mm,
and then, like, the if he had been, I don't know, the not willing to accept this in my life, it had been like, "I'm too big of a pussy, and I'm sorry, but that's about me and not about you." Like, I don't know, I would have reacted better to that,
yeah,
but,
it sounds like Chat GPT wrote that.
I mean, I looked up in Chat GPT how to disclose herpes, so maybe he looked up how to, like,
How
reject
did
someone for herpes.
Wow,
Who knows?
wow. Well, how did that land for you, right? Like, I know it didn't feel good, but, like, how were you able to take care of yourself? Like, you weren't only rejected from that text message, you were rejected initially, you were rejected non-verbally, you were rejected for even offering popcorn, you were rejected parting ways, and then you were rejected in that text message, and then, like, the delay between a response was even a form of rejection.
Yeah, thanks for like, layering it no, just kidding. Thanks for the
I tried
reminder.
to break it down
I
into,
thought I
like,
had 1 rejection, apparently I had, like, 5. No, I'm just kidding.
I was trying to
That's
make it more
okay.
digestible, right? And just kind of speak to those aspects because
Yeah,
it does look different, right? Like, we fear someone just saying, "I don't want to have sex with you because you have herpes." But the reality is, like, that is a like haymaker gut punch, but there's more digestible mini rejections that might lead up to that, that if we can identify one of those sooner, then maybe we realize, okay, well, maybe I don't have to give this person that information because they're rejecting my personality. They're rejecting my boundaries. They're rejecting my attempts for connection and closeness to them. So why would I give them that bit of information? Why would I invest that emotional uh, intensity into an interaction with them?
yeah. I mean, I mean, what you're saying right now is kind of getting me to like wondering the question I do have, like, about the timing of like sharing this, and like, at what point does one, I mean, like, I kind of felt like I saw had an opening and, like, I jumped on it, but, like, maybe that was too early, or maybe it wouldn't have made a difference. And so if it wasn't
Yeah.
gonna make a difference, why not just do it earlier and get it over with? I don't know. Like, I actually have, like, a lot of questions about that I'm kind of struggling with and would love to get your opinion on around timing around disclosure. But
Well, yeah,
yeah,
we can talk
I'll,
about that. We
yeah,
can talk
okay.
about that here. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, like, part of me is like, I'd rather just tell somebody, like, really early on, because it's like it's a lot of emotional investment for me, and like it's like I don't want to go through the motions and, like, make an effort when, like, there's a, I don't know, 50-50, 60-40 chance that they're just gonna, like, reject me right off the, like, just cold, like, straight up, And so it's like, on one hand, I'd rather find that out earlier before I invest the time. On the other hand, I know I'm like, I don't owe them that information that early, and I'm not really giving them a chance to know me. But on the other, but again, going back to the other hand, like, it's a burden for me to have to, like, sit with it. But then it's also like, why should it be a burden for me? Like, why am I making this out to be such a big deal? I don't know. These are all the kinds of things that probably are going through most people's head in this situation. But
All right, so I want to start by saying that you have a 1 in 3 chance of being rejected whenever you disclose to someone. There are 3 responses that they'll have. It'll be no thanks, tell me more, or me too. That's what it really comes down to. So the reality of rejection is 33.3 with the line over the top percent of being rejected. And the other 66.6 with the line over the top is it potentially leading down the path that you wanted to go down. Because even if someone's okay with you having herpes, you might not be okay with their approach in sex. You might not be okay with the way that they want to have sex, or like what their relationship intentions are, or they may not be a safe person. And we kind of default to, are they okay with me having herpes? Yes. Okay, great. We're compatible. And there's so
No,
much more to compatibility than
I
that,
know
right?
it's giving them all the power to just, make that the one parameter.
Right. And I mean, even then, right, like the power that we feel was taken from us with our diagnosis really comes down to us, like, learning that it wasn't taken from us, just learning that we're kind of leaking it into stigma rather than making a choice. When we are able to bring back the power of choice and, okay, like I'm choosing to tell this person rather than looking at like, are they going to be okay with it? Like, you have to acknowledge and appreciate the fact that you told them. You did this hard thing. You know the emotional drain, and you're just getting bigger muscles from it because it's just exercising. The more you
Yeah.
do a thing, the better you get at it. The more you practice vulnerability, the better you get at vulnerability, and the more of it you're going to see reciprocated to you. So to answer your question about like when to disclose your herpes status, I believe that when conversations go from being about sex and what like a person likes and what you like, what they like, to what I want to do with you or what they want to do with you, that's when it needs to be a conversation about sex. Because here's like two people and we're on a trajectory of getting close, and bam, that's the intersection of when we're talking about sex with each other. So from here, as we start to talk about sex with each other, the longer you don't tell this person that you have herpes, the more of a snapback effect it's going to be, because it's going to be more of a shock. Like they might be envisioning what sex looks like with you without condoms, whenever they want to, not having to inquire on outbreaks or medications or anything. And then you tell them, hey, I have herpes. And at that point, you've got to come back
Yeah.
and deal with that shock, that impact of how intense that information can be. And then when we address it sooner, we can go upward together. So it's more of a co creation of what the expectations are. And you're able to develop those together. So when we start to go, well, I see myself, doing this thing with you. Like I really like doing this sex act, right? And then you let them know, okay, well, before we get into that, like I'm really excited about this, but sexual health is important to me. Like I like to talk about STI testing, frequency, things like that. Are you in a place to have that conversation? Yes or no? Right. And also I want to offer this too. Like if you are someone who's dating and you want to kind of bypass the conversation being as heavy or intense, then you could just put it on your dating profile.
I'm not ready to
Just
go there yet. I've
yeah.
thought about it. Not
Well,
not
let
ready to
me
go
let me
there.
offer this to you. So I did this thing on Bumble. Bumble offers prompts where it's like, what's something that you found out that you wish you knew sooner? And it was that condoms don't protect you from getting herpes, right? Like just answering the question in that way, because it also shows some personality. It's not just, oh, I have genital HSV too. And if you're not okay with that, then you can swipe left or whatever
Yeah.
direction it is, right?
Yeah.
It's more about putting it out there in a way that like if people aren't interested, then they're just not going to engage. If they see that on there, they might just be like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. Or if they see it, they're like, oh, well, you know what, like I appreciate that they put that out there. Oh, this person's hot and I still want to see what happens, right? So there's a variety of responses that a person might have to seeing that you have herpes in their profile. So if you
Yeah.
want to just like bypass the whole like build up of when do I have to tell them, how am I going to tell them, then you can do it there. And understand that like this doesn't change what you're looking for. Like you
No.
aren't getting the bottom of the barrel in partnership because you're still asking the questions and assessing for compatibility with any of these relationships that you might be entering.
Yeah. My thoughts two thoughts I think on the the when the conversation happens, like here. one, you're assuming that we're mature adults and having this conversation before it actually happens. And so that's the big thing for me to think about, because maybe like that there's room for improvement in that space for me, for sure. It should be
So
something, but it doesn't always happen.
to
Yeah.
address that though, right? Like now it becomes a matter of what do you want? Because
Mhm.
when those conversations aren't allowed to happen, or if those conversations aren't happening, are those the people that you want to be having sex with? Those are probably people that aren't talking about their own sexual health status. And these are situations where people aren't disclosing their health information or sharing that, right?
Yeah.
So you don't strike me as someone who's interested in that kind of a relationship, because you mentioned like wanting to be a partner and you had a very distasteful look on your face when we talked about the situationship, right?
Yeah.
So you want a relationship, and as someone who wants a relationship, there's going to be more communication. You're going to weed out the kind of people that you can't have these conversations with. That's like a very first, like early on filter or feeler to see if someone is for you or not, because you have a thing that you need to talk to them about, which might be your past uh, trauma history. That's important information for them to know if you're going to move forward in a sexual relationship.
Yeah, the one other thought that I had too is that what I'm hearing is that if the conversation it more happens at the point where it's you're gonna have that conversation about being physical, the thing that for me to work on is like not having every moment leading up to when that conversation happens, like just me feeling stressed and like, oh, I have this thing I have to disclose. And that I think is actually really where my work is working through the like I have this deep dark like there's this thing that's wrong with me and I have this secret and I'm lying if I'm not sharing it immediately, or like, it's causing me so much stress that I have to share before. That's where my work lies, I think.
Well, let's talk about that, because you think your work lies in like not having such a negative view on it. And the fastest way to stop doing a thing is to stop doing a thing, right? I think
Yeah.
that presence is the solution to a lot of issues that people have. So, what did herpes give you? Herpes gave you this litmus test of assessing if somebody's for you. Because if that guy hadn't, rejected you for having herpes, then what would have happened? He might have rejected you later down the road after having sex with you. And then you would have felt more like shit because
Yeah.
like this person had sex with you and had no intention of going in the direction that you were hoping things were going to go, right? Herpes is now giving you the insight and the I'm gonna say, like, out of necessity, the ability to communicate, right?
Yeah.
Because perhaps not communicating was something that led you down this path with
Yeah.
partners. And now you have this reason to initiate a vulnerable conversation, right? So let's begin to look at the positive things that have happened, despite, yeah, some people aren't going to want to have sex with you. And that's just part of the game. If everyone always wanted to have sex with you, even if you had herpes, like what would be the value or the quality of that sex? Like when you hear no a few times and then you hear yes, it hits way different than when you're told yes all the time.
Right. 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 And all of what you are saying is so intellectually, like I understand that intellectually, and it's just going to take time and experience to put that into practice.
Well, how much time though, right? Like how much time are we wasting feeding fear to herpes stigma? And I'm gonna be honest, there's not really a stigma with herpes. The stigma is around sex. How many people get herpes on their mouth, on their fingertips, and there's
Right.
like no issue there? The issue is with sex for a number of reasons. We're not taught to talk about it. Even in our sex education, it's limited to intercourse. We don't want to make babies, we don't want to get diseases, right? And there's this whole scope of things that fall under the category of relationship management, being able to assess for compatibility. How do you know if someone's physically, emotionally safe? We need to be able to identify, where we can get support if we get herpes, right? A lot of people didn't even know that. They didn't know where to go. And this is what led to suicide ideation. So imagine if we just knew before we got diagnosed, like, hey, here's what it's like to have herpes. If you get it, this is a common nerve condition that expresses itself on the skin. If we just had that baseline human, or understanding of what herpes is. And then we were given the communication tools to, enter relationships that are more aligned. I think that when people do get herpes, they wouldn't default to suicide ideation or depression or any of the mental health issues that we're seeing. So, your experience, your story here is very supportive. And I'm glad that you're asking your questions here on the recording because a lot of people have these questions, right?
Mm,
Like, when do I disclose my status? And like, the challenges that come with that, because yes, like we might experience rejection. Shit, I get rejected all the time. You know how many grants I apply for, how many donations I ask for, and I'm told no and nobody responds, right? Like, it's just a genuine part of life, because when I do get that yes, when I do get that response, it always is worth it. And it means that I get to do the thing that I enjoy doing a little bit longer. And I will tell you, like, I say this to my girlfriend. I've had my heart broken enough times to know that the risk of rejection and heartbreak is worth actually having that love and being loved. And it's the same thing here. The no's that I receive when I'm asking for, money for donations or grants, is on the other side of that always going to be worth the money that does come in. And so in the case of dating and relationships, right, through the shitstorm that is dating, on the other side of all those rejections, all the bad sex, all the, incompatibilities, the time, the swiping, the conversations, on the other side of that is going to be that person that receives you as that high quality partner that you see yourself as. So we ain't got time to like sit and distract ourselves with work and wait for the right moment. Like, we have to choose that. We have to choose to, all right, I want to just, let's see what happens. Maybe you put your herpes status on one dating app and don't do it on another dating app. You're
mhm.
probably still going to deal with a lot of the same crap that you're dealing with,
Yeah,
herpes or no
that's
herpes.
true. That's true. It's like going back to what I said, we're like, it wasn't great before the herpes diagnosis.
Yeah.
You so
Mhm. And just, I mean, continue to put yourself out there, right? And do what it is that you do. Live your life, enjoy yourself, right? Like, be who you are in the world and draw in the kinds of people who like doing the things that you like. I think so many people get lost in the herpes thing, that they're so desperate for somebody to accept them for herpes that they kind of lose a sense of identity and self and who they are,
yeah.
and overlook people who like doing the things that they like. If you enjoy playing pool, go play pool. If you like bowling, go bowl. If you like yoga, go to yoga studios, right? Like, do things where you put yourself in a place where you can meet people who just like what you like. And it may not be directly that person, but the opportunities to meet people in their networks. Like, we're all, able to socialize and connect with people through people, through people, through people. And if dating apps aren't for you, or if you're just burnt out on it, then this is how we have to go. Like, we have to go this route. And some people meet the love of their life on dating apps. Some people, like you said earlier, high school sweethearts, right? Um, but there's so many avenues to go about meeting people that sometimes it is, in fact, overwhelming. And there's that decision fatigue that comes with it. But again, like, just closing up the point about rejection, and then time, that was what I wanted to talk about. I'm sorry, not rejection, but the time. Like, there's no better time than now to go for and get what you want, because you said you're busy, right? Like, how often do you start the day, you're like, oh, where'd the day go? And then that thing that you said today that you wanted for yourself right now, we could look up, 9 months will have passed, right?
Totally.
And
Yeah.
you'll completely have forgotten about what we talked about for going out into the dating world.
Yeah. No, that's very true. I mean, I think one thing about me is like if I really want something, like I will make the effort. And I
There you
think
go.
it's like I would also rather try and fail and then never have tried at all and wonder what if I had only tried. And and like even like go back to my marriage, it's like maybe getting divorced will be a mistake, but then I'll know, and there's some like then there would be some peace even in knowing, right? It wasn't a mistake. But sometimes I think after like a rejection, like I need a week or so to, I need to rebuild the resilience a little bit, right? Like I can't, it's like I need like a little bit of time, not months, but like maybe a couple weeks.
You triggered a thought of mine or a thought in me, and who's rejecting you?
Oh, well, I mean, I suppose I've only had like, again, I haven't really dated much post the diagnosis. And so was ghosted by one person after telling them, got this
No,
text
no,
message.
no, no.
Oh, you
Sorry.
mean
What
literal,
I
okay.
mean, okay, so what I mean is like, who are these people rejecting
Oh,
you? Are
people
these
who aren't all
even
that
people
exciting in the first place. They're just dudes.
like is
Not the love
it's
of my
not
life, for sure.
let
Yeah.
it be worth it, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're gonna get rejected, make it worth it. Like set your standards, know, reasonably what your standards are, and only go for that. Like don't allow for these people that, I'm not gonna have 100 rejections. I'm going to put myself in 100 anybody rejections. I want to put myself in front of one person at a time, 10 people. And I know that that's like the quality of the rejection might be significantly more intense because there's so much riding on this because it's just one person. But I'm telling you, like I think we miss things with high quantities of people as well. If
Yeah.
we're dating a lot of people at once, like it's just misfires of timing. So much of relationships are about timing, right? So when I say who's rejecting you, what I want for people to do is really think about that. Like, okay, well, what kind of person is rejecting me? Someone I'm not excited about, someone that actually, we don't want the same things, right? They're here, right? Like oftentimes we're rejected by people who are just there
Yeah.
and we don't even realize it. So the kind of person that we go for who's capable of giving us what we want, who rejects us, it isn't going to feel like a rejection. It's going to feel like, okay, well, hey, here's what I want, here's what you want. We're not aligned here. It's going to feel more like a reality check than a rejection, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. That makes sense. And that's why I haven't been that is also part of the reason why I haven't been like dating quite as much. There is a piece of it is like going more for quality and a little bit less about quantity. I think,
There you go.
yeah.
All right.
That's
That
also partially why I've dated less in the last year is like I think I've learned some independent of herpes, like I've learned some difficult lessons, unfortunately, the hard way about and I've yeah. So, but focusing a little bit more on quality and am I really aligned with what this person wants and not maybe like, oh, they'll change their mind or maybe, like, yeah.
mm,
So that
okay.
is also one reason why I have dated less this last year is I have been a little more discerning about who I choose to go out with.
And let's say this too, because I think people really believe that their options, the quality of their options is limited. But the dating world sucks for everybody, right?
Right.
Like attractive or unattractive. Like I think more unattractive people are having better luck with dating than the people who consider themselves to be attractive. I forgot where I heard. I don't want to put nobody on blast, but I heard that before from somebody, and I just started laughing so hard because you would think that because these people are attractive and they have options, right? Like everyone's throwing themselves at them, but everybody has options. So if you're going to choose to put yourself in front of somebody, put yourself in front of somebody that, aligns with your at your level. Like I shouldn't have to say this, but like let's be realistic, right? Like you know what your caliber of person is. Because you have herpes does not take you down a few notches or anything. Does it put you in a different category of person? Yeah, if that's what you choose to prioritize about yourself. But just because you have herpes, like your looks are gonna matter, sometimes how much money you make, your occupation, your personality, who you are as a person, and so much of who we are as a person becomes associated with our herpes diagnosis, and we don't see it, we don't notice it, but we're less funny, we're less charismatic, we're less sexual, we're less, and so we think that we need to settle for less because we've made so much less of ourselves. But when we still have our standards, our quality is still up here, I do believe that, over time, right, and after experiences, we can begin to shake what our beliefs might be about ourselves and what we deserve now as somebody who's living with herpes. Like, I know there will be no like, lowering standards and expectations. Like I like the word standards over expectations
Yeah,
because standards more so align with, me. Like this is what I'm holding myself to. So therefore, if no one's meeting these standards, I don't have to worry about expectations.
right. Expectations about the other person, standards are more about us. Yeah,
Exactly. Yep.
yeah.
You said
Mhm,
it.
yeah.
Did you have any other questions? Did I answer all your questions about, when to disclose and
Yeah, I think again, like the thing for me to really work on is like not feeling I have this like big secret that I have to like share immediately and like waiting for like the time when, we're getting to hear. Uh,
yeah, just like when conversations become about sex with each other, it's fair
yeah,
to set the expectations of what sex is going to look like with each other. And all the way, also, like, we don't really know what we like or like how to talk about sex, for ourselves or what we like, don't like. Those things are very important conversations to be able to have with ourselves, right? If
yeah,
we can't have those with ourselves, we can't expect to be able to have them with other people. So, knowing what you are looking for, knowing what you do and don't like, these are critical components of also like navigating the dating world.
yeah. And they're all things that I do feel like I have kind of figured out about myself in the post married era. And
Hmm.
so definitely though an opportunity for me to, be a grown up and have that conversation with somebody more than just myself.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it. Do you anything else?
No, thank you for having me. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
no problem. I appreciate you reaching out and being willing to come to the workshop. Were you able to see the recording?
From yeah, like from a few weeks ago. Yes, I did. I
Hmm.
did. Yeah.
Oh, okay. What'd you think of it?
It was good. The main question that I had around was like thoughts around kind of like sharing immediately versus like waiting to the point when you reach
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
That was my main question around.
Okay. Well, that recording of the herpes disclosure workshop is available at www.spfpp.org/offerings. It's right there, but if you go to the website, you'll be able to find it. And I just make that accessible for people. Oh, wait, you won't get that one. You're going to get the first one. So the first one's like a PowerPoint presentation and everything too. But the most recent one is just available to the people who registered for that particular workshop. But we'll have other opportunities to get together live and virtually to be able to talk through different things, herpes stigma related, especially with disclosure. So be on the lookout for that. I'm also putting together a men's herpes support group. So if y'all are out there, I have an intake form that will allow for you to just sign up as someone curious and interested. And then I'm going to touch base with you all on what's appropriate time, frequency, dates, and then like pricing for that as well, because y'all don't do anything when it's free. So y'all gonna have to put some skin in the game and pay something. All right. But yeah, that concludes this episode of Something Positive for Positive People. Please like, rate, review, share, subscribe to the podcast on whatever listening platform you listen on. This one ran a little bit long, which is fine because it kind of turned into like some Q&A about very relevant things to talking about herpes and your herpes status and that communication component. So much of what we do is communication focused because we're giving you the skills and experiences that people with herpes have had to learn through experience that we can integrate into our education resources so that people who get to this point are better able to manage their mental health and the impacts that diagnosis may have on them. All right. So that's it. Till next time.
Bye.